Thank you guys for tuning in for another video. I trust that you're glad to see me, as I'm glad to see you. So, there seems to be this prevailing belief that in order to live in the 21st century, you must use social media. That is, social media is a necessity of life. Well, I would venture to say that that is not necessarily true. You may be thinking, what is my basis for saying this? I'm glad you asked. Well, I just so happen to be a person who does not use social media. And if I may clarify, I actually do use one social media technically, which would be YouTube. Of course, I have a YouTube channel, and I also use it for my own personal satisfaction pretty regularly. But as far as having like a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, etc., all those different platforms and accounts, I have no presence whatsoever. Now, when I reveal this to a lot of people, especially recently for some reason, I'm not sure if it's just coincidence or what, but recently I've gotten the question, why do you not have social media? Why do you not use social media? Usually the reaction of people who learn that I don't use it is that of surprise. And I suppose that's reasonable, right? Social media is pretty common, and we've established that there is the prevailing belief that it's normal, right? That a person should use it. Like, for me, it's not so much a matter of asking or framing it such that I'm trying to determine why I don't use social media. For me, it's a matter of asking, why would I use social media? And the thing is one thing we can all acknowledge is that there's not a single person watching this video who at some point, granted you use social media, hasn't been able to recognize the negative aspects of it. And that's something that kind of stuns me, because despite that, social media, using it is so common, right? So this phenomenon is not unique to social media. Another example I like to use is fast food or processed foods. A lot of us, most of us, I think all of us know that processed foods or fast foods are not good for us. They are very bad and unhealthy for us, and yet we still consume and eat them regularly. I mean, regularly to the point to where many of us eat them weekly, if not daily, or multiple times a day. And so, this for me represents an enigma that may be most simply or easily explained by human psychology. And that is that human beings are not totally rational. You see, we have this assumption that we are purely rational beings, that we're totally rational. And nothing could be further from the truth. The reality is that we are very easily manipulated and influenced into doing the things that are not in our best interests, and indeed totally inconsistent or downright irrational. And so, I say all that to say, I'm not anti-social media. I want to clarify, I want to sort of get that out of the way. I'm not one of those people who thinks that social media is objectively, by all standards, a bad thing. I definitely get that there's a sort of pros and cons to this. And I'm not here to make a video about the pros and cons of social media, right? I'm not here to really rationalize why you should delete social media, even though the title of this video may imply that. This is more so to encourage you to do what you already know to do. If you have at any point in your life been able to consider the fact that social media is a detriment to yourself, to your livelihood and your well-being, or your mental and emotional health or whatever, and yet you still use it, I simply want to be that person who gives you the nudge of encouragement to go forward and try life without it. Because speaking from personal experience, I can honestly say that you're not missing out on much if you don't have social media. One of the things that I failed to mention was that I did at one time have social media. When I was 16 years old, I made the decision to delete all of my social media. I once had an Instagram, a Facebook, Snapchat, even a Twitter, though I don't think I really used it that much. And at the age of 16, I was able to realize and recognize and understand that social media was not good for my life. It wasn't conducive to my lifestyle and who I wanted to be. In other words, it detracted from who I was rather than contributed to who I was. And so I made, from that straightforward and simple observation, I made the straightforward and simple decision to do away with it, right? And while it's very difficult for me to sort of forecast or measure the effects of that decision on my life, I have absolutely no doubts whatsoever that it was a positive decision on my life, and that it was probably the single best decision I've ever made. I also want to be clear about something. I don't think that my lifestyle or my opinion is superior to anyone's. I don't think that, for example, any anybody living in the 21st century can just up and delete social media. Obviously, there are some people who can't afford to do that. Maybe they make their living off of it, or they have some other reason that they have to have it. But um, the thing that really bothers me is when people believe or are convinced that they must have it when they truly don't. And it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, is that we're easily manipulated and influenced into doing things, engaging in behaviors that are not necessarily good for us or in our best interest. And when I look at social media and the effects of it, and again, I didn't want to make this a pros versus cons video, but there are a lot of things about social media. For example, it encourages narcissistic and self-absorbed behavior, compulsive behaviors. It contributes to depression in young people, especially young girls. I mean, there's a host of research and data that indicates just how bad social media is for us. And again, it begs the question, if this thing is objectively bad for us, why are we so inclined to keep it around? Why are we so inclined to normalize it and to make it preferable and desirable, and to look at people who don't indulge it as obscure or as odd and peculiar? At the end of the day, for me, it boils down to this. You can do a lot more with your time. You can do a lot more with your life, your livelihood, and yourself if you're not hindered by social media. If it is more of a hindrance than an enabler in your life, then it has to go. And this idea that you're missing out on something, or that you will lose something if you go through with that, is it's not an objective feeling or an objective idea to base continuing to do something that is, by many counts, not good for you. I hope I worded that right. In other words, here's the thing. It makes more sense to at least try living without social media than it does to live with that doubt that social media is good for you and continue to use it anyway, right? At least give it a try. Worst case scenario, you say, hey, this is not for me, and you get social media again. But you'll never know what it's like to try life without it until you actually take that step. And so again, I didn't say anything that was groundbreaking or too revealing in this video. I simply say things that I think most people are already aware of, that you yourself are aware of. This is pretty much common sense. But as the old adage goes, common sense is not so common. And I want to also say something else. Just because something, and not just social media, but anything, just because something is popular, just because it's common, just because it's normal or normalized, doesn't mean that it's right. Doesn't mean that it's good. Just because everybody else accepts it and goes along with it and tolerates it and even prefers it, does not mean that you should do so as well. And so, yeah, I'm not going to be too long-winded with this one. I actually want to delve into this topic even more, and I intend to do that on a longer episode of a podcast that me and one of my friends recently started. I forgot to mention this, by the way. If you have time, look up GeoAsh. I should probably provide a link in the description or something so that you can easily find it. It's a YouTube channel right now. It's in the infancy stage. We're talking about a lot of social, cultural, philosophical issues, especially as they pertain to our time and our generation. And social media is one of the topics that we're going to discuss here real soon. So, yeah, if you have time, I think that you might enjoy it. It might interest you. So check that out. And I'll try to leave a link in the description so that you can more easily find that. Aside from that, yeah, that's all I wanted to say, guys. I thank you just for tuning in. And if you have any questions, comments, critiques, etc., as always, please put those down in the comment section below. I love interacting with you guys. I love the compliments as well as the critiques, and I love the questions. I love all the feedback. So don't be shy. And until next time, bye-bye.